Hello and welcome to Decolonising Education course. My name's Steve Icorn and I'm Professor of Material Science and Engineering at the University of Bristol. I'm delighted to be joined by Eva Larko, who's a final year medic student, and she's also working with the BAME Medical Student Group at the Bristol Medical School, and she's going to talk to us about decolonising medicine. Welcome, Eva. What does it mean to you to decolonise STEM?
So for me, I think modern science has undoubtedly been entangled with colonialism. And actually, I think that the legacy of colonialism still pervades and shapes science today. And for those of us involved in the drive to decolonize, we recognize that this work is incredibly complex and multifaceted. And for many people being welcomed into discussions for the first time, it can be somewhat confusing and inaccessible. But at its core, I think that the work to decolonize seeks to understand and disrupt the ways that colonialism, racism, and Eurocentrism have for so long saturated and dictated what we learn, how we learn, and who we learn from. And I think it's a call to identify and interrupt those sort of persisting remnants of empire in our academic practice, and to then go on to appreciate different and equally valid systems of knowledge, particularly those from outside the West in regions like Africa, Asia, and Latin America. But actually, I think beyond that, it's also about the learning experience and the learning environment as a whole, rather than just a focus on subject material. And actually, I think it requires a real collaborative, cross-disciplinary approach that fosters an environment for unlearning and reconstructing, rethinking, and co-creating.
What examples are there where colonial thought has influenced medicine specifically?
So for medicine, I think it's quite difficult to neatly define the areas that should be included in decolonial work. But for us, there have been a few important areas to start. So we can think about increasing the visual representation of darker skin tones in clinical teaching. So sort of moving away from whiteness being default and representing sort of the multi-ethnic community that we see here in the UK and across the world. It's also been about authentic and non-stereotypical inclusion of people from diverse backgrounds. And actually, I think what's quite important to this work is the discussions on the history of race and medicine and how these things can be embedded in our ethics teaching. We've also been trying to sort of examine some of the existing health inequalities in ethnic minority groups and seeing if there are any links to colonialism in what we're seeing today around sort of mortality and morbidity in the patient's population. But actually, like moving on from those things that I've mentioned, I think it's also about applying a decolonial lens to research approaches, norms and practices, and so considering how global research has been influenced by the colonial legacies that affect the knowledge that we impart in education. And so beyond that, it's then recognizing some of the geographical biases in research outputs, whereby the institutions in the West often dominate the global knowledge that exists today.
So what are the challenges, do you think, to decolonising medicine?
So I think there are several challenges, and I think the more that we engage in the work, the more that we're realising sort of the extent of the challenges that this work is highlighting. But I think across medicine and other disciplines, the same sorts of questions are being asked. So how exactly can we decolonise? Who should be doing the work to decolonise? And how can we truly think critically about all parts of our education to decide what is to be included and how it should be included? So in that way, I think the challenges are similar across disciplines. But for medicine specifically, I think what we're asking for is to encourage doctors to cultivate an attitude of open-mindedness, curiosity, and humility, and to actually self-examine and recognize their own implicit biases and to challenge them, and then to go beyond that and think about how that might then impact upon patient outcomes and the healthcare environment as a whole. And so I think actually beyond that, there's a real sort of push towards a translation into action and tangible, noticeable changes in how we care for patients and how we fulfill our duty of care to patients, to provide healthcare that is holistic and also safe. So for medicine, I think it's that core element of actually translating that reflective practice into what we're doing on a day-to-day basis to impact patients that are here and now.
So who else is working in this area and what are you engaged in right now?
So there are multiple people working in this area at the moment, which makes it quite exciting, because actually what we're finding is that there's a lot of co-creating going on, both within the University of Bristol and beyond. But from a personal perspective, I'm working with medical students here at Bristol, but also medical students nationally in other university institutions across the country. And alongside that, we're trying to link up the work that's going on more widely in the University of Bristol, and that important cross-disciplinary approach that I've been sort of talking about, I think really is being seen as a positive thing, as different disciplines are working together at the University of Bristol. In, for example, like Decolonize UOB and Forever Africa Conference and Events, which is run by a lecturer called Feluke here at the University of Bristol. So I guess what I'm saying here is there are lots of people involved in this work and being welcomed into this discussion, both here at the university, who I'm working with, and also across the country. But I think actually, because of the nature of this work, I think it needs to go beyond our immediate spheres of influence. And actually, we need to be welcoming people across the globe, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, in these non-Western regions, who have been directly impacted by some of the effects of colonialism, and welcoming them and their thoughts and ideas into the conversation.
Thank you very much.